Good evening, everybody. My name is Danny Miller, and it's my privilege to introduce tonight's program. A little bit of background. The communities of the Fruitland Peninsula are on the cusp of unprecedented growth, whether we want it or not, it's coming. It's critical to preserve our historic character while being accommodating to smart growth that is sensitive and complementary to our architectural heritage. Our vision statement declares that we will advocate for the preservation of historic sites and structures in our community. In furtherance of this vision, your Peninsula Historical Society has requested that the city of Crescent City provide funding for an historic preservation plan in the coming year's budget. To this end, we brought to the city a proposal for the initial phase of an historic preservation plan from Preservation Design Partnership, PDP. Preservation Design Partnership's past work has included 19 historic districts of New Orleans, including the French Quarter, a National Historic Landmark, Newton, Massachusetts, containing over 30 National Historic Districts, and Oak Park, Illinois, which is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Their work involves collaborating and educating client groups, stakeholders, community leaders, and the public in shaping projects, achieving consensus, very important, everybody on the same song sheet, and effectively reaching conclusions. A significant local project you may be familiar with is PDP's work on the Historic Preservation Master Plan and for the city of St. Augustine. I think we can all agree that St. Augustine is really a shining example of historic preservation in this country, if not in the world. It was through the professional network of the late Jim Steggy that we were able to garner the attention of PDP. And really, we should count ourselves fortunate to have attracted the interest of the firm. Our program tonight is making the most of preservation planning tools, how our preservation plan can lead the change for Crescent City's preservation goals. Our speaker tonight, appearing via Zoom, is Jennifer Wolfe, Preservation Planning Specialist with PDP. Jennifer joined PDP in October 2021 as a preservation planning specialist with 15 years of professional experience in historic preservation. After earning a Master of Science in Architectural Studies degree, specializing in historic preservation from the University of Florida, she began working at local government and nonprofit levels. Her work as the Historic Preservation Officer for the nation's oldest city in St. Augustine included developing and administering 10 preservation grants totaling more than $1 million. Achievements include implementing an historic preservation master plan, something we in Crescent City need desperately. Updated architectural surveys covering the entire city, historic rehabilitation programs, archaeological data analysis, exhibit design, heritage tourism programs, National Register nominations, and programs for public education, soup to nuts. In 2014, Jennifer was appointed as a board member for the Florida Trust Preservation, where she currently serves as the president. Under her leadership, Florida Trust has expanded outreach through a regional ambassador program, started a seed fund for the annual 11 to Save sites. Noah's Ark up in Palatka has just been named to that list, as well as, I believe, a historic home in Pomona Park. He produced multiple conferences and workshops and is working toward a statewide preservation tax credit. As a preservation planning specialist with PDP, Jennifer's experience with local communities such as ours across Florida and her advanced understanding of challenges integrating cultural resource planning within state and local agencies uniquely qualify her for assisting Crescent City to develop a much needed historic preservation plan. I'm very fortunate to have Jennifer join us tonight. Please join me in welcoming her. Jennifer, thank you.
You are very welcome. And I just want to make sure we do a test real quick on the audio. Am I coming across okay?
Yes, we turned up any.
Excellent. And in the room, we're all good there?
I have to change the audio to the. Okay. Still sounds like it's.
All right. I'll get my presentation set up here.
coming out. Yeah, it doesn't. We'll see what happens.
Can you try and say something?
Can you all hear me now? Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
A little better. Okay.
Better? I'll try to speak up more, and maybe if I turn my volume up, I don't know if that will make a difference. But I will go ahead and begin, and stop me at any time if something's coming across fuzzy or not loud enough, and I'll slow down or back up. First of all, we're good? Thumbs up? Okay. First of all, I want to apologize for having to postpone my previous presentation that was scheduled for last month. There was something that came up, as you may be aware, it was super last minute, and I really hate to do that. It's certainly not an example of the type of work that we do and what I like to do, but it just could not be helped. So I appreciate your patience. I'm glad to hear that you all got together anyways, and were able to have some good conversation. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. And I hope that my presentation is short enough and kind of provoke some questions, and you all might have some already queued up for me, because I'm happy to do this as much conversational as needed. And I'm happy to come back anytime. Doing this virtually is a piece of cake, usually on my end. So that makes it easier. The second thing I wanted to say is I'm really sorry to hear about the passing of Jim Stahey. I was caught quite off guard by that. I didn't know him super well in St. Augustine, but once we got connected from his work with you all, I could tell he was very passionate and wanted to move the ball forward. And so I'm appreciative that you all are keeping that fire going. So who am I? Why am I here? And who is PDP? Who is the Florida Trust? I'll just briefly share with you that, well, you heard most of my experience. It sounds like a lot, but it's actually been spread out over a long period of time, it seems like to me, between going to college and volunteering years, and then just getting to work. So I've had an opportunity to work at a local level, a local nonprofit level as a volunteer, as well now as a statewide nonprofit, and from public sector to private sector. So I'm very familiar with the process of encumbering work through a local government. I understand those challenges, and I understand the challenges from a city staffing perspective of, how do you develop an ordinance language, and how do you figure out what's going to work, and what is that process, and how do you get people on board? So it is multifaceted, and it does take a lot of people together to make it happen. So I'm glad to see you here. I think that the introduction gave enough about Preservation Design Partnership. The Florida Trust is a statewide nonprofit organization that's been around since 1974. First started with 72, with the effort of saving our own Florida's Capitol building. There was a proposal to demolish it, and instead they decided to expand by incorporating the historic building. And so we still have that today, thanks to that effort. And a lot of our work has shifted from individual building preservation to community preservation. And you'll notice through the years, our 11 to Save sites, our most endangered sites listings, have really reflected that change from an individual building. We've done cemeteries, we've done cultural heritage neighborhoods, and things that can sometimes go unnoticed. So we've really tried to broaden our efforts as much as we can to save those important places. I will just dive right in to my presentation. I'm not hearing or seeing any questions at this point. I took a brief look at the Crescent City's ordinance, and so I just wanted to point out to you, for those of you who don't know where to find this, it is on the city's website. You can find it, I think it's on municode.com, or you should be able to navigate to it from the city's page. But one of the most important things to do, as I think some of you all already have at least, is to understand what the tools currently are in the toolbox for your city. What is the local ordinance? What is the comprehensive plan? And what are they telling your city officials that they're supposed to be doing? A lot of times it's written in, you should do this, you can do this, we hope to do this. It may not be direct mandates, but as long as the language is there, that empowers the local government to say, we have authority to do this. And so you then have the power to hold them to it. So I just wanted to point out these things that are on here because these are things that are very useful in acquiring preservation programs and acquiring grant funds to take these on, even if you don't know exactly what the outcome might be. I don't know if there's anything here I want to point out specifically. I hadn't looked into seeing when the last inventory or historic resource update was for your area.
1995.
1995. So it's way overdue to have a historic resource survey update. And that would be very important. So that's something that's the state of Florida really likes to fund survey projects in areas that haven't been surveyed or that their surveys are really old. And ideally, they're updated every 10 years. So that's definitely a priority to work forward on. For this point that I wanted to make, I know it's important to you all to convey the fact that preservation and your historic resources do contribute to your quality of life, and it does contribute to your economy. And I just wanted to give you all an opportunity to tell me what you think, those particular things are. If you had to verbalize that, how would you say that you can see your historic buildings or the setting and landscape? How do you see those as benefiting to your community?
They attract tourism.
Tourism, that's definitely a good one.
Conveys a sense of place. We're trying to emphasize through current marketing, both our location as the city between the lakes and our historic character. So it's central to the current promotional efforts within the city.
Okay, and I might ask you to, and you can follow up with me on this in a little bit. We do like to focus on sense of place, but how does that contribute to your quality of life? Does it mean that you want to venture outside? Does it mean that you bring in new property owners? Does it mean people are keeping up and repairing their properties? We have to break those down just a little bit more so that it's something really tangible. Are there any other ones?
A sense of pride, pride in where you live, and that makes you proud to bring people in.
Okay. I hear you on that one.
Also, we have some houses that maybe the people are poor and they don't understand that they sitting on a gem and they letting it go. And I'm afraid that eventually when they died or the thing is not going to be worth saving, and how we let these people know how important their homes are, to fix or to help them if they don't have money to fix it, paint, a lot of it is paint.
We do have an awful lot of condemnation by neglect. Yes. And since that 95 survey has been done, we've had quite a number of properties that have just gone, been demolished, and quite frankly, the existing historic preservation ordinance is not being enforced by the city.
Okay. I heard another one, tax incentives. Okay. What was that? Okay. Business on the plaza.
I think it's important to preserve some of these buildings so that the community can use them.
Community use.
Yeah, adaptive reuse.
Such as the one we're in.
Well, you're hitting all of the buzzwords for sure. So I appreciate that you all have got the wheels in motion for that. What do you think is the biggest hurdle for those who aren't like yourselves that are in the room? Those of you, those not of you, of in your community that don't see the value. Is it financial because it costs to preserve? Is it not wanting, regulations that tell you what to do? Or what do you think those barriers are?
I think part of it is that people don't understand the history of this area is a big part of it. We have a lot of new people that have moved in and really just don't know the history behind this area
I think a lot of it's financial too.
and financial.
Like that, the house that we lost the other day on North, it probably is a cheap lot and they got it and they cleared it and now they're gonna build a house there. It was just cheaper to tear down the house and get rid of it. Even though it's from 1910.
Okay, is there any?
Maybe teaching them in school. I heard in the past, the history was taught in the schools. I don't know, maybe the 50s, the 60s. And it's no longer, pride for the children.
Mhm.
It's important that we get buy-in to the vision from city leadership. And that's incomplete, we should say.
Well, just
Is our
so
city
that-
commissioner in the room this evening?
She's on.
Okay, very good to see you again.
On Tuesday and presented to the Main Street Florida Board. And we are being recommended to become a Main Street city. So that
Excellent.
should help.
Important
Historic,
step.
yes, that's a step. And our city manager is the leadership behind that. So that's a really a big plus for us.
Next step is a historic preservation plan.
Yes, absolutely.
So that
I
we're
mean,
not so that we're proactive instead of reactive.
Mhm.
I see
Otherwise,
them
it's an ad
working
hoc.
hand in hand and really supporting one another
Agreed.
very well.
Excellent. Well, that gives me a really well-rounded scope, which will definitely help me to understand what your challenges and opportunities are. And I can't say enough how fantastic it is that y'all are being welcomed to the Main Street program. That's going to be such a great opportunity. And congratulations. All right, so I'm going to just go over some other general preservation planning tools, just so that you're aware. I think we already pretty much touched on a lot of these. Comprehensive plan is something that is required for each community to have, but it's not required to have a historic preservation element in the comprehensive plan. However, the Florida statutes does require other sections of community comprehensive plans like future use to address historic properties. So there are other ways of getting it in there, even if it's not a designated plan. And then you do have the Historic Preservation Master Plan. Sometimes that becomes your comprehensive plan. In St. Augustine, that's very much what happened. We did we did have a historic preservation element. I think it was like 4 or 5 pages long. And then we did a historic preservation master plan, which was about 120 pages long. And that eventually, once the city got around to updating its comprehensive plan, which is also required every 5 years by the state, then a lot of that just fed right into the historic preservation element. Other things are getting a cultural hazard mitigation plan, looking at your land development regulations and ordinances, which we already touched on as well. And then if there are any natural resources or parks or state parks or local parks, making sure that preservation is considered in their cultural resource management plan. So as far as the goals in preservation, one thing that I kind of touched on briefly is the fact that you have a survey that is from 1995. And so that's 25 years old already. So you've lost some historic resources, but also in that time, you might have gained historic resources. We can't just look at resources that are from the 30s and the 40s or earlier. We have to look at things from the 50s through the 70s. And some of these things may be landscapes, they may be streetscapes. So we have to definitely think outside the box to make sure that we get the whole picture. But we want to first identify what the goals are, and the survey will help do that. So identifying what those are in your community, and that's all done from a community-based initiative. You can hire consultants to come in and do that work, but ultimately all they're going to do is make recommendations. They're going to advise, but what the community itself, you all and your local government, you have to agree upon those to where they become either a comprehensive plan and or land development regulation. So some of the key questions going through that process, and this is something that I would really encourage you all to do in a workshop. And this might be something that we could help facilitate in the future. But getting community surveys done will help provide the data that you need to convince your local government that they need to take action. It's not enough, probably, that it's somehow mentioned in their ordinance. It's not enough that they said they might do a preservation plan, but they're going to try to figure it out, based upon the resources they already have. So if you can help frame what the issues are, these are the questions that I would ask so that you all can understand how much of the community is interested in this effort and how you can frame in a way that becomes more tangible and more relevant to the most people in your community. So I'll talk just a little bit about what is a historic preservation plan. It is a written document, and it can be like or similar or the same as a comprehensive plan. Just keep in mind that a comprehensive plan is a regulatory document that does have specific parts as required by state law, whereas a historic preservation plan itself is much different. It's very much tailored to the local community. It is very similar in many ways to the comprehensive plan, but it's going to look at some basic elements. Why is it important? What do we want to preserve? Look at what you've already done and evaluate the success and opportunities to improve upon that. What are we currently doing? And think in the forward, think in the future. In preservation, we're not always looking back. We still need to look forward. And some of the things that we've unfortunately had to be pointed out to us, it's not like we didn't already know, but we're dealing more and more with some climate issues, and we're dealing more with learning how to adapt our historic resources to sustain those climate issues. And unfortunately, it comes through some really hard and unfortunate situations. But the silver lining, how small it may be, is that we can see clearly what the impacts are. So you want to plan at least 5 years ahead. If you do a historic resource survey, you're not going to do your 50-year cutoff from today. You should do it for 45 years so that it has a shelf life, so to speak. And let's see, when do we want to begin that additional protection? Usually that's yesterday, but that's kind of a given. Typical components of a preservation plan, again, it's tailored to the community. You all decide what you want to be in there. It can be very concise document that's 20 pages, or it can be a longer document because maybe you want more imagery and graphics, or historical information, survey information. That really just depends on, well, some of the budget, but some of it's really what it's going to take to put into a document that's going to motivate your community to take action and be responsible and accountable for it. We're going to talk about your goals, what preservation is in your community. In every community, it's different. And I think that's kind of one thing that's neat because it gives you an opportunity to say what preservation is to you or to your neighbor. And I like to emphasize that, some people think you need a degree to be a preservationist, but you don't. I mean, you all are in the room, you're a preservationist as far as I'm concerned. And, that's what's great is that your goals can be totally different and you can still be wanting to promote your cultural identity. Similar things that we've talked about, the survey of historic resources, you need to kind of identify certain themes of them. You don't have to have a complete survey, but you want to know where the periods of significance are and what is the nature of those resources. They may be archaeological and they may be historic buildings, but just remember it's not limited to just one of those. The legal basis for protection is going to be your land development regulations, first and foremost, because that is what empowers the local government to spend money. Of course, it has to also meet Florida statutes, which changes sometimes every year. Something may be changed where, say, signage can't be regulated to a certain degree, as we've seen. Same thing happen with telecommunications towers. Some things are preemptively removed from local government power. And this past year, there was an example that we're going to try to address in the upcoming legislative year. And I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent, but I just want you to know how important it is to pay attention to politics of your local and state government, because demolitions now for properties, historic properties that are in a designated flood hazard area, do not have to go through any design or development review process. And that was something that happened just this past year, and it kind of went in under the radar. And for some places, it doesn't really matter, but in places I know down in Southeast Florida, it matters, and to St. Augustine, it matters. Because you want an opportunity in your community to understand if that building or resource has some unique history that hasn't been recorded yet. And if there's no public review process, there's no process to kind of research that. It just goes away. So enough about that. And I think the rest here is also kind of intuitive. We want to have incentives. We don't want to just be beating sticks. We don't have as many carrots as possible. So that takes a lot of creativity, which is why I asked some of the questions that I did earlier on, is because we need to understand what's going to motivate people who aren't really on our side of the fence, either now or ever, but there are still some ways that we can find common ground. Strategies to undertake the plan. There are different ways that you could do that, and there's lots of resources out there of other communities that have done it differently than St. Augustine. But I will say in St. Augustine, one of our major focus pieces was the fact that we wanted to do it in a multi-strategy way where we were involving the community. So before we ever hired a consultant, we had public workshops. We even had a nonprofit group called the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. Similar to how I'm sharing with you what a preservation plan is, they came in to St. Augustine and shared, national examples of preservation plans so that we could start to figure out what's going to work for us. Because again, when you're just getting started, you really need to figure out what your focus, what your goals are going to be. So in St. Augustine, what we ended up with were several strategies, and they were divided across city planning, historic resource inventories, our local land development regulations, building demolitions, economics, hazard mitigation, archaeology, of course, and education. So in each of those, in our preservation, well, it's not ours anymore, but sometimes it's an old habit. In the preservation plan, each of these sections identifies ways to meet each of those topics that you see underneath. So that 1 and 2, then there are items in there that talk about how that can be done. I thought I might have had that on the screen, but it's going to be different for every community. But what we ended up with was creating a matrix. So we had each of these numbered items, and then we said, is this a local government action? Is this a nonprofit organization action? Does it require an ordinance change? What other resources might be required? And how important is it to us to take this on? Is this a short-term goal? Is it a long-term goal? Those are all things that you can put together and spread out in a matrix so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. And I can provide you the link. If you haven't seen St. Augustine's document, you should really, it's a great one, of course, to take a look at it because PDP did it. And I was there as the city planner during that process. So I'm just very familiar with how it worked. And I feel like it was pretty comprehensive. And I will say, unfortunately, we went through Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Irma during that process. So what was supposed to be a maybe 2-year project ended up taking 4 years. And there was some growing pains because once we got it put together, after 4 years, we were taking a look back and saying, well, I don't think we've captured this quite right. So there are definitely a lot of challenges going through the public review process.
Hello. Hey, Fred. Hey, I was just checking. Were you going to text me that information?
I did
Oh boy. When? This morning?
this morning. Yeah.
Oh boy. Oh, I didn't get it. Okay.
All right.
Let me take a look and see.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Can you,
Should I continue?
yes, sorry. Thank
Okay.
you.
No worries.
Okay,
So
yeah, text it to your phone there.
313-884-3067.
Yep,
They may have-
it was delivered, well, let's see, that one was delivered then. 10:04 this morning.
Huh. Well, I'll tell you what, could you send it to my email too then? I guess we'll give that a try.
I don't know if I know how to do that on the phone.
Gotcha.
are you trying to send the Zoom link?
All right, well, no problem. I'm just kind of wondering, no problem. Maybe it
Yeah.
didn't show up yet. Lost in cyberspace.
Yeah, well, should have made it,
I'm with you, but, oh,
yeah,
well.
because it says it got delivered.
Yeah.
Muting.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. I know it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
We're back.
Apologies.
Sorry.
That's okay. I think I'm almost done here. I can ramble on. So I apologize. I was probably getting on a little too long, but I wanted to give you some next steps. I mentioned already the idea of having a workshop just so you can get your neighbors together, especially those who aren't in the room, to talk about some of the goals that you want to take on and figure out what's important to them. So you definitely want to expand your resource base and look at the area institutions that you can partner with, and prioritize your issues. I think out of this list, the workshops and prioritizing about 3 to 5 top issues of concern are going to be easier for your local government or whoever's going to take this on to be real specific and to focus their efforts so that you don't get an overwhelming document that looks at too many things. You have to really narrow it down and do piecemeal steps, small steps. Yeah, and that was all I had, and I wanted to certainly leave it open for discussion. I can stop sharing my screen, but if there's anything that you want me to come back to, I'm happy to do that. I had a lot of fun looking up some of these images. So I hope that was relevant. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you all. Any questions, ideas, or strategies?
Jenny, you were saying about the, doing the site review or doing the site survey. Is it correct that as a nonprofit, we can apply for those, a grant from the department or the Division of Historical Resources?
Yes, yes, you can.
So,
Now, the only thing is, but the caveat is that as the nonprofit, there will be a match requirement unless you're a ready, is your county a ready community?
I believe we
We
are.
are a ready community,
Yes.
yes.
Are you, okay, then you would not have to provide a match, even as the nonprofit. The sun is moving. Sorry about that. And most of those, I would just throw out there just for your benefit. The grants that the state issues for those are, I think, a $50,000 maximum. And depending on the community size, a comprehensive survey will probably cost 40 to 50,000 from a consulting firm.
With that,
I have a question. There are a couple of members of the tree committee of Crescent City in this room and some former members. And we have a lot of very old live oak trees. And we are fighting hard to preserve them, but is there some way they can be included in a historical plan?
Absolutely.
They're irreplaceable, you know. And they're
She mentioned streetscapes.
Mhm.
I would think that that would come under streetscapes.
And also another tool for that is a cultural landscape study. And that is similar to a historic resource survey, but it's something that would go out and you would look at what are the historic landscapes, because you can even nominate a landscape to the National Register.
And what would that entail? Like, what is it that makes it historic? Or, I mean, we have beautiful lakes here. Lake Stella, you watch the sunset. Does that qualify?
So there's a separate National Park Service bulletin that talks really everything you need to know about it. So I'll send you the link. I think his name is Charles Burnham that wrote it. But what essentially would be is say, so y'all are familiar maybe with what a historic district would look like, where you would have buildings, some are contributing and some are not. You have a boundary, and you have a varied amount of resources in there. Some are residential. You might have a depot or an opera house, or they're just gonna have different things in there. A cultural landscape should have a system, a network of spaces that still convey a historic image. So if it's the rolling hillsides, the trees and the waterways connected to a downtown plaza, if you just imagine you want to look beyond the buildings, because it's not about the buildings, but it's not just like a tree survey either. It's a different animal, and it's not something I've done before, but I know that National Park Service brief has more information.
National Park Service does.
Parks and are often, I recall, as cultural landscape protection, worthy of protection. Where I'm from, Arboretum was established. So it's a range.
Mm-hmm.
Lime Park is a national, it's on the national register. There's that contributing, it's contributing to our district.
we have a downtown city park that takes up an entire block that dates back to the 20s.
And that's in our district. Yeah. So,
Yeah, I'm actually looking up the link right now, so I can send it to you. Put it in the chat.
we should go ahead and use this section. So that's how
Jenny, may we ask that you email, this is Danny, email to me your PowerPoint deck, and if so, may we share that?
Absolutely. You're free to share that, and I'm glad to see that you recorded this so that you can use that in the future as you need it. I'm going to put this link in the chat right now before I forget. I have so many screens open. I apologize. See everyone in the meeting. Okay. And yes, I don't know if I can upload.
If not, you can send me a
Send it,
Google,
but
Google Drive link or something.
Yeah, it shouldn't be too big for email, but I will definitely send you an email right away with my PowerPoint.
a lot tonight, but to begin, do I understand correctly that we should do kind of a community-wide survey using that format and those questions that you showed us, and then follow up and workshop those results? Is that kind of a good starting point?
I would maybe do in tandem, if you can, is with the workshops, because that's going to be what you're going to use to get your historic preservation plan going. But you really do need an updated historic resource survey, and that's usually done entirely by a consultant unless you have well-trained volunteers. But that can be going on separately because it's more of a fact gathering and data gathering process. Whereas, and you want that to really be teed up and be ready to go when you're ready to move forward with your preservation plan. So I would encourage it. When we were at City of St. Augustine, we had various stages of resource surveys, and we were almost to where the whole city had been surveyed, but not the whole city updated, because that would be like 15,000 buildings. I'm sorry, 8,000 that are 50 years old and older. So that would have taken too long. But if you don't have that many, it's something that can usually be done in about 6 months. Especially a cultural resource management firm, they'll be able to knock that out.
That's about a $40,000 price tag, you said, and funding available from the state.
Yes. The thing with that to keep in mind is the grants operate on an annual cycle. So this year's grant cycle, next year's grants have already been evaluated. So you wouldn't be able to apply until June of next year. And once the legislature approves the budget, you would, and you got selected, your grant got funded, you would start that project the following year.
So apply 23 for 24 funding.
Correct.
How long does that process take to update the historic resource survey? Or, excuse me, to apply for a grant to fund that?
Oh, to apply for the grant, there's usually an open window of at least 30 days. And there's a form. The way they do the grants at the state is all digital. So you upload and answer questions online, and you upload information to support what you've reported in there. And I mean, it could be done in a matter of a few days if you had knowledgeable people spending all their time on it. Otherwise, it could be done in a matter of a couple of weeks.
Could you hazard a guess as to how much it might cost to engage a grants writer for that function?
You should be able to do that this is me speaking. I'm not representing what PDP. I don't know if PDP has done that before, but I want to say grant writers, I would imagine 1,500 to 2,000 if I had to guess. Because you might want them not only to write the grant, you might want them to represent it, so that you go before the meeting of the Florida Division of Historical Resources and defend the grant. And then you can also use that person to administer the grant if the city doesn't have a person to do that, or, but you can do it yourselves. It's administrative work.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Back here.
I want to feel that the scope of the different plans. It sounds like one was primarily for buildings, whereas the other was probably could be for other historic things like landscape. Or can all that be put in one grant, in one application?
Can someone repeat that just to make sure I've heard it correctly? It sounds like you're wanting to know if you can do a historic structures master plan and a historic landscape plan?
No, the surveys.
Surveys. Oh, yes.
Surveys. Is one that have to do with buildings, that have to do with other resources or what?
No, a survey, you can define it how you want, but usually they're called a cultural resource survey. And if you're doing a cultural resource survey, your consultant is charged with looking at everything. If you're doing a historic structures survey only, then you've told the consultant you only want to look at the historic buildings and historic districts. But the whole picture is looking at landscapes, looking at cemeteries, looking at historic walls or other features of the community that might be elements.
Archaeological site, we have an Indian. And that's called a cultural resource survey.
Yes.
Does the state look especially favorably if an application is directed at the underrepresented communities within it?
Yes. I can say the past at least 3 years, they've had a special focus on awarding points for underrepresented communities, endangered communities, and sites that might be threatened by environmental issues.
Great. We've got some wonderful candidates here for to be safe. Any other questions?
Is there a way to get example of what the survey looks like? In other words, what information is there samples that we can get from other cities that have done the survey?
Yes.
That part from 1995. Okay.
St. Augustine is available online, correct?
It is, and I'll send you a link to that. I'll send a follow-up email with a link to that so you don't have to try to dig through their website to get it. But the last I knew, we did have that posted on the website.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Well, Jenny, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful and very informative presentation, and with your help, we look forward to accomplishing great things here. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Reach out to me anytime. Good luck to you all, and thank you for your patience again and rescheduling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. For any of y'all that would like a copy of PDP's proposal to the city, get with me after the meeting. I'd be happy to email a copy to you. Also,